Hello and welcome to Breaking Ground, a CheckProof podcast and our very first episode. I am Joe Cage, Head of Customer Success here at CheckProof and your host for today. We're excited to kick things off with our very special guest, Mårten, Managing Director of SBMI, the Swedish Trade Association of Aggregates and Construction Materials. Mårten, it's a pleasure to have you with me today. Welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Mårten, you are, as I said, the Managing Director of SBMI, which means that you have a kind of a front row seat to any of your members' priorities and the innovations that are going to be coming through to the industry. Would you be able to just kind of walk me through your background? What is SBMI?
One of SBMI's core missions is to raise public understanding of how essential aggregates are to everyday life. Aggregates is the second most used material after water. Roads, sidewalks, concrete buildings, all is in stone. Just you can ask that question on any conference. How did you get here? Everyone walked on something produced with aggregates, or they drove on something produced with aggregates, or they took a train using aggregates. So aggregates is essential to society, and most people grasp this very quickly when you explain it, but they don't walk around thinking about it every day. In Sweden, we use 100 million tons of rock every year in Sweden. And we had a situation where we had over 5,000 quarries around 50 years ago, and now we have about 1,000 quarries, and it continues to decrease. Of course, this is partly due to the transition from using natural gravel to crushed rock, but it's also an effect of the fact that it's very expensive and very time-consuming to apply for a quarry permit. Every single quarry is important for the Swedish aggregate supply, and it's crucial for society that we as a society understand the importance of the quarries.
Yeah, and I think you knocked the nail on the head there when you said when you were comparing it to water. You don't really think about it in that way, but when you really dig into that, my house is built out of construction materials, the path outside the house is construction materials, the roadways, everything results back.
But that is on so many different levels, because one level is, of course, to increase the common understanding and sort of the common knowledge about what materials we use in society. And on the next level, it's of course about the people that are actually working with making decisions about quarry permits and politicians and every parliament representative in Sweden should visit a quarry. That's I think would be a great goal. Because if anyone needs to understand that the role of quarries for society is very important.
Moving into the climate roadmap topic, the roadmap was recently updated to reflect changes in the industry in 2019. What are some of the key drivers behind the update, and can you tell some of our listeners about the climate roadmap who may not be aware of this?
Yeah, we experienced that there was a broad interest in supporting the industry's climate transition, and at the same time there was this Swedish initiative, Fossil-Free Sweden. So there are actually 23 or 24 different sectors that have made these roadmaps for fossil-free production. It was very good timing for us, and it was a great engagement from our member companies.
And the roadmap itself, what does that look like necessarily, or who is it for? Is it for people within the industry? Is it for operators of companies?
It's for many purposes. I would say that I would not underestimate the process of making it, because that was a very important sort of gathering the industry together and getting sort of a common perspective on what do we have to do to be fossil free. It all started with the Swedish climate law that implicates that we will be fossil free in 2045. Is that possible? And how? What do we have to do for this to be possible? And that was very, very good discussion within the industry. What do we have to do? Communicating what do we need as a sector to be able to do this industry transition to fossil-free production. And also, of course, it's a good common platform for the industry. This is this is the way we're going. We're all going in the same direction.
Okay, then. So in terms of Sweden, how advanced would you say they are when it comes to reusing materials? So whether that be concrete or asphalt?
Okay, now we're talking about the circular economy.
Exactly.
And the increased need for circular material. That's an issue that we have been working very much with in SBMI. We are not the front runners in the EU, because there are many countries that have a lot higher level of recycling and reused aggregates. Mainly because we have a very good supply of virgin material in Sweden. And there are many countries that don't have that. For example, Netherlands, Belgium, that are sort of forced into either importing aggregates or producing more and more of circular aggregates.
So you have quite a large reserve to fall back on. You're not struggling to provide raw material to
exactly. But on the other hand, there is a great interest in Sweden for increasing this part, this share of the total need of aggregates, because it's very important in the context to stress that aggregate is needed for whatever you build in society. If you build infrastructure, if you build buildings, if you build railways, you will need aggregates. And it's a very natural goal to do this in as sustainable, as resource efficient way as possible.
So as far as I'm aware, there's no technical challenges to reusing materials such as concrete and asphalt. So what would you say is the main reason as to why it's not being done as much as it could be?
I would say that the challenges are very different on a national level. And in Sweden, we have a very broad waste definition, sort of, in application. And now we're working a lot with also the process of end of waste. And right now they are working on EU common end of waste criteria for construction and demolition waste. And talking about different types of material, we're working a lot with construction rock, because, for example, now in Stockholm, we're building a lot of tunnels and we have a lot of construction rock. But we're also working with masses, construction masses in general, and also construction and demolition waste, which has not been recycled in a great extent in Sweden. But if you look at the Netherlands, for example, they are increasingly using construction and demolition waste for producing aggregates. So what we will see is EU common process for end of waste for construction and demolition waste. And I'm really looking forward to what that can lead to, what the effect on a Swedish level will be of from that.
Yeah. And then in SBME, is it something that you are you in dialogue with any of these regulatory bodies? Do you get involved with this topic of regulation when it comes to circular materials?
Yeah, that's a lot of our work. We have close contacts with the Environmental Protection Agency and also politicians on national level on this issue, and also on a European level. That's a big part of what we do in SBMI. We have close contacts with agencies and authorities.
So, Mårten, do you feel like there are any materials in particular that are easier or recycled more than others in Sweden?
Well, in Sweden, we are quite good at reusing asphalt on a national level. The recycling rates are high, but we lag behind compared to other EU countries when it comes to demolition waste like concrete and excavated soil. Especially compared to those EU countries in the front, like for example Netherlands. But we are working very actively on this issue. We recently launched our industry common guide for circular aggregate production, and there is a strong interest in increasing the circularity on a national level.
And would you say asphalt is higher because it's easier to process than, let's say, soil? There might be more risk of contamination or something like that.
No, it's rather about legislative matters that asphalt is not considered as waste.
Okay,
and we have good processes in the industry to recycle the asphalt.
Yeah, so it's going back to that topic you spoke about earlier. What is considered waste and what isn't, that needs some work.
So this regulatory or perception challenges, they must really be addressed. It's a huge topic for us. We could easily do a whole podcast on just that issue.
On that.
Yeah. First, we need to avoid classifying materials as waste unnecessarily. And then for materials that are considered as waste, we need clear and legally sound end of waste criteria, and we're working on that both on national level and EU level. And also another issue is how we handle materials with naturally high levels of some substances like sulfur, a major topic in Stockholm subway project right now. We have a huge amount of construction rock from tunnel drilling in Stockholm area. And the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency is currently working on new guidelines for this issue. And SBMI is closely involved in this project.
Sounds like it's really a topic of interest for you, and hopefully something that continues to develop in the future, so you can reuse more and more and more. Mårten, what would you say that the cement crisis is revealing about supply chain vulnerability?
There is some discussion in Swedish media at the moment about this, but of course the cement crisis exposed the huge need, the huge dependence in society for cement, and I would say that the need for aggregates is as large. The difference is just that there aren't just one quarry for aggregates, but some more. So it's not we're not that dependent on one single unit. But it has, of course, put the light on the importance of getting these permits on a societal level. So it's right now there is a proposal out for public comments on a new process for a new permitting process that is more close to the EU process. And of course, that's related to a lot of initiatives on an EU level. For example, last year we had this Critical Raw Materials Act and the Net Zero Industry Act, and they are not including aggregates as critical raw material, but it's very related to this issue, because the need for aggregates is maybe not critical from an European importing perspective, but it's critical for building society, and it's an essential material that we need for all building society.
A key ingredient that if it wasn't there, we would notice very quickly.
We can joke about, let's close down all the quarries for 1 week and you just see what happens. It's an interesting thought experiment. But to get to the point, the crisis put material supply and environmental permitting processing very much on the political agenda.
Moving away from sustainability and into the kind of next generation of the workforce within the industry, it's something that I came across when I first started working in quarries, and I know it's definitely something that affects the US, but there is somewhat of a generational shift going on at the minute. Older workers are starting to retire. Not as many young people are coming through. How does this? What does this look like in Sweden, and how is the aggregates industry kind of preparing for this generational shift?
To start with, we're definitely seeing a generational shift in Sweden as well. In some ways, of course, it's a continuous, natural part of the industry's development, but it does pose some challenges, I guess, especially because the aggregates industry is not very well known. Many young people are interested in sort of working in construction or working in civil engineering or working in building sector, but very few of the young generation, they grow up dreaming working in a quarry. With that said, once people do enter the industry, they tend to stay for life. There are many people that I meet that has been working in quarries for their whole career. So what we have to do is sort of get the people to start working in the quarrying industry. So the challenge is to getting people to discover the aggregates industry in the first place.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking from experience, I only really knew about the industry because I had family in it. Though true, once you're in it, you tend to stay because it's it can be a very rewarding career. There's a clear career ladder. I feel like there's a place for everyone as well.
Half jokingly, we sometimes say that slipping on a banana peel is our best recruitment strategy, because most people seem to like stumble into the industry by accident, and when they do, they stay. Of course, we recognize the importance of actively creating an inclusive, modern, and welcoming industry. So the young generation will find it attractive to work in the industry, That's a very important issue for SBMI, to promote a professional and respectful work environment. One initiative during last year, during 2024, we put together this code of conduct, which sets out a very clear expectation on values across the industry, and where all the SBMI members, they have to sort of sign it and accept the industry common goals and industry common levels on these issues. It's very important to have a welcoming and modern industry.
Yeah, because like you said, once you're in it, you tend to stay. So which proves it's a good industry to be in. Otherwise, people wouldn't stay in it. We just need to get better as an industry in general, internationally, at advertising the benefits of the industry. I know that in the UK there's an initiative called Minerals Matter, which aims at getting more young people into the industry. But yeah, there's certainly a whole world of opportunity and development once you're in it. What is SBME doing to raise the industry's profile locally?
Well, as I said before, we focus on communicating the positive contribution of the industry to society, and also we try to focus on our positive things that we do in our sector, like for example our fossil-free roadmap and our circular production guide. These tend to get attention, and it's a very good, very important marketing material for our sector. Still, we keep working on the long-term public education, which is a very, very important task.
Yeah.
And as the new sort of geopolitical context, there is a new focus on national preparedness, and I think that has helped to put focus on how critical local resources are for resilience and for building infrastructure, and to help with building and repairing society in times of crisis.
Yeah, I think that's so important. The kind of advertising the positive contributions to the industry, because a lot of the time people only really come across the industry in bad situations. They live down the road from a location that is applying to be a quarry, and they instantly think back to maybe the 80s when sites were just left how they were in a very dangerous way and not restored to any sort of use afterwards, whereas we're a lot better at that now. So we kind of have to work on changing the perception.
Of course, there is nothing positive about the new very challenging geopolitical conditions that we're experiencing, but at least one positive thing about it is that it tends to raise the awareness of what if and what do we need if resources become really scarce.
Yeah. So just before we finish off, Mårten, we ask everyone the same recurring question before we finish, and that is, if you could automate one part of your job or one specific task on a production site at the push of a magic button, what would it be and why?
I think we have to go back to this huge task that we've been discussing a lot. That has to be increasing the public awareness about the need of of quarries about the need of aggregates, because that is so challenging and so interesting. Everyone has a relation to aggregates without even knowing it. Everyone meets aggregates on an everyday basis, but they don't think of it. So that would be my one wish, would be that more people acknowledged the pleasure and joy of aggregates around them.
Yeah, takes a lot of work, I'm sure. But that's all we have time today. Thank you so much for joining me, Mårten. It's been amazing talking to you.
Thank you very much. It's been interesting. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who's listening to this episode of Breaking Ground. Don't forget to follow and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And we will see you next time.